This disaster is on you. You started this blaze. I told you, Karen, not to break ground on that property. Look at what you've done. People died because of your actions. It was heartbreaking. Nobody deserved to suffer or lose their life that day. But I suppose when someone makes reckless choices, they eventually pay the price for it. Let me explain. I work the land, and I hold ownership of several plots scattered across this region. Most of my time passes quietly, in predictable rhythms tied to the soil, the seasons, and the steady demands of farm life. My property, as it happens, borders a gated community, and a few of my fields were purchased well before that neighborhood was ever built, back when this ground was untouched, unregulated, and open. I dealt with several HOA leaders over the years, and while most were merely nosy at their worst, this latest one, Karen, showed up like trouble incarnate, clipboard in hand. She was overbearing, harsh, and obsessed with penalties, measuring lawns down to the inch, clocking how long bins sat curbside, dangling liens like threats wrapped in candy. The neighborhood dreaded her outbursts. Still, her hunger for authority kept growing, reaching for more land, more influence, more spotlight. One morning, just before daybreak, the earth began to shake, and the harsh grind of machinery pierced through the mist. Stepping outside, I found heavy equipment tearing into one of my fields, clouds of dust rising like distress flares. A handful of HOA committee members stood nearby in logo-stamped vests, playing at authority. They claimed Karen had greenlit a drilling operation for a water reservoir, insisting it was an emergency necessity for the community. No paperwork, no warning, just sheer nerve. I informed them the land was privately owned, documented, and clearly marked. They responded with laughter, treating me like some stubborn obstacle. Walking the edges of the property, I spotted disturbed survey markers, ignored relocation signs, and crossed boundary lines. Something felt off, beyond simple trespassing. This ground carried a history, buried pipelines, legal easements, cautions born from painful experience. I ordered them to halt the work at once, but they hesitated, phoning Karen while the machines kept roaring. Her tone came through arrogant and dismissive, urging them onward and telling me to relax, since progress doesn't wait around. Onlookers gathered, recording everything, murmuring in confusion. Fury rose in me, tangled with a creeping fear, because when reckless authority collides with hidden danger, the outcome shows no mercy. That instant burned itself into my memory, as the digging pressed on and Karen carried on elsewhere, untouched by what was coming. That plot of land was far from ordinary. Anyone who'd taken the time to read the markers planted there would have known that digging was a dangerous gamble from the start. Running beneath the surface was an old oil transfer pipeline, safeguarded by law, easement rights, and plain common sense. A leftover from an earlier era of energy infrastructure, yet still live and under pressure. Years back, I'd installed warning signs, impossible to miss, because carelessness invites disaster faster than anything else. It became clear that the board members had either overlooked those signs or been instructed to act as though they didn't exist. I halted the machinery myself, planting my body in front of the rig until the operator killed the engine. Then I insisted the crew arrange a direct meeting with Karen. Grudgingly, they complied, irritated but visibly on edge, and I headed straight for the HOA headquarters. Karen was seated behind her glass partition like royalty holding audience, coffee cup steaming, smile razor sharp. Calmly, I laid out that the drilling amounted to trespassing and criminal negligence, carrying consequences of fines, lawsuits, even prison time. She dismissed it, insisting HOA authority outranked a farmer sitting on unused acreage. I repeated my warning, more deliberately this time, stressing this wasn't about property values or water rights. It concerned safety, pressure, and explosions that strike without asking. Karen sat back, smirking, claiming my land was finally serving a purpose and that the community had voted for progress. I told her plainly there had been no vote, no permit, no clearance, and that pushing forward would endanger lives. She dangled the promise of a board meeting, a review, a compromise, one that conveniently allowed the drilling to continue in the meantime. I stormed out, furious but methodical, documenting every detail, contacting my attorney, filing formal notices, and sending warnings to every relevant address I could track down. That weekend, I traveled out of town to oversee another property, hoping distance would clear my head and that the legal notices would be enough to slow Karen's momentum. I left Friday night with documents stacked on the passenger seat and a nagging unease riding along with me. By Sunday afternoon, I was heading back, half listening to local radio updates through crawling traffic. Then the broadcast shifted, sharp, urgent, unmistakable. A fire had ignited near the edge of town, multiple crews responding. Evacuations underway. The location struck me like a blow. I pressed down on the gas. Smoke darkened the sky in shades of black and orange, curling upward like a flare meant only for me. Sirens tore past as I made the final approach, my pulse outrunning the engine. Arriving on scene, I found pure chaos. Flames wrapped around metal, the ground had split open, and the stench of fuel choked the air. Firefighters worked frantically, hoses straining against a pressure-fed blaze that wouldn't surrender easily. Neighbors stood at a distance, sobbing, recording, paralyzed. I announced myself as the property owner, and was waved past the barrier long enough to witness the destruction. The borehole had struck something deep, something unyielding. 2 lives were lost, their absence heavier than any words could carry. 4 more were injured, faces coated in soot and shock, waiting on ambulances. Karen was absent from the scene entirely, her name circulating in hushed, angry disbelief. Reporters pushed microphones toward anyone still breathing. Camera flashes lit the chaos. I gave only the essentials, facts, timeline, the warnings I'd issued. Fire officials confirmed a ruptured underground line, with a full investigation now underway. The drill rig remained behind, twisted and melted, a grim monument to arrogance. As evening fell, the flames finally gave way, leaving nothing but scorched ground and a heavy stillness. I stood there in shock, understanding that every warning dismissed had become consequence, every laugh transformed into ash. Meanwhile, far from the smoke and wreckage, Karen slept peacefully, unaware that the earth had spoken at last, and it wasn't finished speaking. The investigation moved in gradually, like the first chill of winter, then engulfed everything. State inspectors, fire marshals, pipeline engineers, and investigators questioned the work crews, the neighbors and me, gathering emails, timestamps, permits, and recordings of every warning given. My old notices resurfaced, my maps lined up exactly with the easements, and my phone calls were all on record. The depth of the borehole matched the rupture point precisely, erasing any doubt and laying bare the intent behind it. Karen attempted to spin the story, pointing fingers at the contractors, the weather, and what she called my harassment. That defense crumbled the moment internal board messages surfaced, revealing orders to ignore the posted signs and keep drilling through the night. Under deposition, her composure fell apart. She fumbled dates, contradicted her own statements, and her sneer faded once the evidence closed in around her. The board members broke first, exchanging truth for a lighter sentence, confessing to the pressure they'd faced, the threats made, and the favors dangled before them. Charges piled on. Trespassing, criminal negligence, and counts of involuntary manslaughter tied directly to her reckless orders. The courtroom carried a weight of its own. Grieving families, rolling cameras, a silence that spoke volumes. I gave my testimony once, straightforward, without embellishment. The judge took it in. Jurors watched as Karen transformed before their eyes, from domineering tyrant to frightened defendant, her rage giving way to fear. The verdicts came down hard. Sentencing followed, measured but without mercy. Karen ended up behind bars, stripped of her power and her audience. Court-ordered restitution drained her finances, forcing the sale of assets to compensate the grieving families, cover medical expenses, and help restore the damaged land. The HOA itself collapsed under the weight of audits, liens, and lawsuits. A new leadership stepped in, rebuilding the community's rules around consent, proper permitting, and humility. My fields recovered slowly, the soil treated, the markers reset, trust rebuilt one careful step at a time. I still work this land. I still put up warning signs. I still hold on to the belief that tragedy teaches the lessons arrogance refuses to learn on its own. That day cost lives, and no outcome can truly make up for that loss. But accountability still matters. Authority without understanding is like a drill with no safety switch, and consequences always reach the depths they're owed. The earth remembers what happened. We should, too. Memorials were built. Names were spoken and honored, and safety training became mandatory across the county. Because prevention only means something once, grief has already taught its lesson. I set up scholarships for the victims' families, not to seek forgiveness, but out of respect. The boundaries were surveyed once more, pipeline routes were made public, and emergency drills were practiced repeatedly until complacency no longer had a place to hide. Accountability held firm, vigilance returned, and never again did silence take the place of a warning.